All right, I want to go through section 4.7 with you today, and that is all about completing the square. Now, you may have seen a little bit of this before, but for most of you, this is going to be a brand new topic. Okay, and there are plenty of steps for this, so please make sure that you are writing each step down, showing all of your work, and that way you can go back through the steps as you do this on your own. So, completing the square. So what I want to start off with first is just what we call a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. This is going to be really helpful, trinomial, when we are trying to find the, when we are trying to complete the square, because when we're completing the square, we are looking for a perfect square trinomial. So some basic examples of perfect square trinomials will be something like x squared plus 14x plus 49. And the reason it is a perfect square trinomial means three different terms, okay? And a perfect square is, remember, something that we can get from squaring our numbers, like 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and so on. So if we were going to factor this, so this is good factoring practice, we would have our two parentheses, and we want two numbers that can multiply to get 49 but add to get 14. Well, in this case, we get x plus 7 and x plus 7. Okay, so same identical solutions. 7 times 7 is 49, and 7 plus 7 gets you 14. Okay, so that is our perfect square trinomials. Another good example would be maybe something like x squared, and then let's see, plus 12x plus 36. If you factor that one, you get x plus 6 and x plus 6. Okay, so perfect square trinomials are really easy to factor, and usually you're going to have some pretty nice numbers just like these. Okay, well, when we're completing the square, what we're looking for is a perfect square trinomial. So what we're going to practice is coming up with a perfect square trinomial. If I give you something like x squared, let's see, plus 20x, you are missing right here the number that goes at the end. You're missing your c value, your constant. So how could we find this value? Well, it's really simple. What you're going to do, okay, is take your b value. So remember, this goes a, b, c. Okay. We're going to take our b value and we're going to divide it by 2. So 20 divided by 2. This is step 1. So b divided by 2. When we take 20 divided by 2, we get 10. So that's our first step. Excuse me. Step 2 is to square it. So we're going to take 10 squared, which gets us 100. So that is our final value. So when we plug that in, we get x squared plus 20x plus 100. And there's our perfect square trinomial. And if you were to factor that, it could work out x plus 10 and x plus 10. If you FOIL that, you get what we started with, so you're ready to go. So try this example on your own. Maybe we have x squared plus, let's see, 16x, and I want you to figure out what goes in C. So press the pause button, try that one on your own. What you should have gotten for step 1 is that you take b divided by 2. Well, b is 16, so 16 divided by 2 is 8. And you're going to want to show these steps when you're completing the square, so make sure you get in the habit of it now. And then 8 squared gets you 64. So our answer would be x squared plus 16x plus 64. And you're done. So that's basically your first couple of steps in completing the square. So now let's go through our steps of completing the square. All right, so this is really done easiest by showing an example. So I'm going to start off with a basic example. Okay, so when we're looking for completing the square, maybe I have something like x squared plus 6x plus 4. equals 0. Well, usually we would sit here and we'd try to factor this, and this is a little bit more difficult because this one doesn't factor nicely. Okay, so we can't really use any specific method for this one. So by completing the square, we can make this factor really nicely. And so what we're going to do is complete the square, and then we're going to solve. Okay. So step 1 for this problem is to move your c value over to the other side. Okay. So move c. So we're going to, when we move c, we're going to get x squared plus 6x equals negative 4. So we just move the negative 4 over to the other side. From here, we're going to go ahead and do what we just did with the perfect square trinomials. Okay, so step 2 is to make a perfect square trinomial. All right, so to do that, remember we had step 1, which was to take your b value, so there's b right here. So 6 divided by 2, and we get 3, and then we're going to square it. So 3 squared is going to get us 9. So when we rewrite this, we're going to get x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay, so we added 9 to the left. This is where it's a little bit different. Because we added 9 to the left, we have to add 9 to the right. So I'm adding 9 to both sides. From here, we're just going to go ahead and simplify. Okay. So make sure you're writing these steps down, showing all your work. Okay. When I simplify this, I get x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals positive 5. Negative 4 plus 9 is positive 5. Well, from here, we're going to go ahead. Step 3 is to factor. So on the left side, we want to factor. Okay. And this is going to make it really easy for us to use our square roots. So if we factor a perfect square, remember it's x plus 3 and x plus 3 equals 5. Now if we have the exact same thing written twice, this can be rewritten, and this is really important, as x plus 3 squared equals 5. And this is perfect. It's factored, and now this is exactly what we want to start solving for our equation, because we can do this. This is what we did in the last section. So if we have x plus 3 squared equals 5, step 4 is to solve. So when we solve this, our first step is to take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then lastly, we want to subtract 3 over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 3 and subtract 3. These cancel. And I'm left with x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. And there's our answer. So it takes a little bit of practice, but we're going to go through a few more together. Just make sure you follow each of the steps, and this will make it a lot easier. All right, let's go through example 2. Let's say I have x squared minus 10x plus 8 equals 0. Well, in this one, my c value, remember this is a, then b, then c. I need to move my c value to the other side. So move c, and I get x squared minus 10x equals negative 8. Okay. After that, I'm going to make my perfect square trinomial. Okay, and I'm just abbreviating PST. Okay. When I do that, remember I take my b value divided by 2. So that's negative 10 divided by 2, which gets us negative 5. And then I want to square that. Negative 5 squared is a positive 25. That's important. Make sure when you square a negative, it becomes a positive. And then we're going to add that to both our sides. So we're going to have x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals negative 8 plus 25. So that's step 3, or 2, sorry. Step 3 is to factor. So when we factor, we're going to get x minus 5 squared. Okay, remember, this is the same as x minus 5 and x minus 5. If you're not sure if it works, negative 5 times negative 5, that's positive 25, and negative 5 and negative 5 add to get negative 10. Okay, so x minus 5 squared equals, and then negative 18 plus 25, negative 8 plus 25, that is going to get us 17. And then our very last step is step number 4, which is to solve. So for this one, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And when we continue solving, we get x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. And then we can add 5 to both sides. So these cancel, and we get x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 17. And there's your answer. So really the most important parts, I think when you get to step number 4, you guys will be good. The most important parts are making sure to move C over, and then the step 2 and 3 are probably the most vital parts, making sure that you divide B by 2 and square it, you add to both sides, and then that you factor correctly. So remember, for these, you should have the same exact thing in the parentheses so that you can write it as x minus 5 squared or x plus 2 squared or whatever it is. It has to be the same exact thing when you factor. All right, I want to go through one more